Okay. So, hello, my name is Christy Steltenpohl. Lindsey was diagnosed with DIPG when she was 5 years old. It was just a short while after her 5th birthday. So we had taken her in for her 5-year checkup, and she had some balance issues and some headaches going on at that point in time. So we were concerned with maybe allergies at the time, because she would wake up in the morning with, minor headaches, but nothing that we were overly concerned with. And that kind of escalated very quickly into some other concerns. And she was sent for an MRI a couple of days later, and we were told about the brain tumor at that point in time. She went through your traditional treatment, which most people followed at that point in time. Steroid treatment for inflammation, radiation that she had to do 6 weeks in a row every day, and some minor chemo at that point in time, because there was not a known chemo to help in alleviating what was going on with her. And so we followed that protocol, tried some, we went through some testing, different things that they were traveled to Chicago for some trials and things like that. Went to MD Anderson for a second opinion, went to the NIC outside of Washington for another opinion. So things are progressing, I know, quite a bit now compared to her diagnosis was in 2010. So we're 10 years out. But there wasn't a lot of guidance on what we could do for a child at that point in time. So we were grasping for straws. We were lucky enough to have the honeymoon period, which I think a lot of people refer to, where she went for her doctor's appointment, but otherwise lived a pretty normal life for about 9 months. And after that, her tumor started to grow again, and we were given the option for a second round of radiation, which we chose to do because that we had gotten such good results the first time. But obviously, that's pretty drastic to take, a course of action to take. But we felt like that was the only thing that had given us any relief the first go around. So we did that, but unfortunately was not as successful in giving her any kind of bonus quality time at that point. So we were lucky enough, like I said, to have Lindsey 16 months after her diagnosis, which is quite a long time in the world of DIPG, unfortunately. And so she died just a couple of days after her 6.5 birthday. So we have been without her since 2011. But we are very active in supporting the cause, different organizations that do continue to try to do research to find a cure, as it's a very rare, they tell us, tumor, but doesn't seem so rare with as many cases as we unfortunately are connected through the community to see. So obviously one child is more than enough. If it's your child, it doesn't seem rare. So that's what we continue to do. We have family, friends, group that follow us and participate in events. We do it under the name of Lindsey's Legacy in honor of her. And so we just continue to try to push the agenda on what can we do to research and advance the cure. As they say, if you can find a cure for DIPG, it would probably solve the majority of brain tumors out there, because it is so difficult to pinpoint and treat. So that's what we're hoping to do, is continue to support that effort. Even though she's not here with us, I think there's a lot of value in continuing to prevent it from happening to someone else. So that's how we choose to participate in living past the time that we were allowed to have her here with us. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. Lindsey truly is an angel, and I can't imagine how hard it must have been. Like, I can only imagine. So thank you so much for sharing. And so what has the journey been like from the time Lindsey was diagnosed till now?
Obviously, it was very dramatic. She had always been pretty much healthy, active child, and to go from, thinking you've got a case of allergies to a pretty rapid decline in what your prognosis is, because again, it's been 10 years, so I don't know what the answer for parents that are getting diagnosed is now, but literally the person, we had an MRI and they walk in the room and tell us she's going to die. So there was no hope given or treatment plan that was presented to us. It was more or less, what do you want to do to, I guess, fill the space until that happens. And so obviously that was a pretty hard pill to swallow, and very hard for me because I had never heard of DIPG prior to her diagnosis. Didn't know anybody who, social media wise or otherwise, that had ever had that. And to me in 2010, for someone to tell you that your otherwise healthy 5-year-old had no hope of living, that's obviously, still to me to this day is pretty unbelievable that is what's happening. And I do feel like even 10 years later, there's some more hope, there's some trials, there's some potential treatments, and they're making advances, but the mortality rate is still pretty high and close to 100% at this point. So that the journey of thinking that you have a child that has something that's basically unfixable or terminal upon diagnosis is obviously a struggle. So the journey was trying to go between what can you do to fight something that nobody has any tools to help you fight, to how do you make the most out of the time you have, and what does that look like. So I think we did a very good job of making sure, we did a lot of good things, and we made a lot of memories, and we met a lot of great people that we're still connected with 10 years later because of that. So I think there's always good to be found in any situation, although it's not always easy to focus on. There definitely is that, but the biggest thing is just wanting to figure out how there could still be something like that there's absolutely almost no hope for. So that's what I'm trying to get past, because again, when you hear of a new child being diagnosed, I mean, that's obviously knowing what their parents and themselves are going to have to go through. And then depending on what their age is at the time of diagnosis, those are very different conversations and very different levels of understanding. So, I've often said it would be bad enough to have that heaped upon you when you're making the decisions for yourself, but when it's your child, and it's a lot of extra responsibility to figure out what you should choose to do or not do and how you should handle it, because they're not capable of contributing. At 5 years old, she wasn't able to really weigh in on that. So I think in some ways that's good, but in some ways it's very bad because it's all on you, and you just have to make assumptions about what you think they would want you to do. Because at 5, there's not a lot of in-depth thought about what that looks like, because she didn't really have a concept of what that meant, right? I think people who have older children, or there's some probably way more difficult conversations that happen, but responsibilities probably weighed out a little different too. So I think it's a very different journey for people depending on what that looks like and what their family makeup looks like. So that was what our journey was. We had some very good times and some very bad times at the end. And I will say this, it is one of, if you've lived through it, it's one of the cruelest diseases I believe I've ever seen. And that, you watch your child gain all these things and then you watch them all go away. So, it's very hard to watch that happen to anybody, obviously, that you love, but in such a very rapid time, watch it change who they are and what they can do, and wonder what they still understand or are able to get out of what's going on. It's very painful to see.
So what do you think is the most important thing for people to know about DIPG?
I think the most important thing is just knowing that until there's, until there's research, there's not going to be an answer. And because it doesn't affect a broad percentage of people, um, doesn't mean that the research is not valuable and not important. Because again, I do think it ties to a lot of other things. And like I said, it is one of those things you don't want to wait until it happens to you. And the population of people that it's happening to is our youngest, most vulnerable people, right? So, we put a lot of time and effort and energy and money into curing cancer for adults, which makes a lot of sense because I think it's still a foreign concept and very hard for us to believe that there's something that could kill children the way that it does. So I think the most important thing to know is that, we have to have people that are passionate about it. We have to have people that want to contribute because, again, it may not be your child, but it may be your grandchild or it may be your friend's child or whatever that looks like. And to wait until it happens, obviously, is too late. But I think it's just making sure. I equate it to it's the childhood version of ALS. I mean, you see a lot of people and all the time and attention and notoriety that gets because it is truly a terrible disease, but it basically incapacitates that person, much like what DIPG does to kids. And again, I think it's one of those things because sometimes it is easier to just look away because it's hard to live in or deal with or absorb because it's such an awful thing that just making sure that people don't think, well, it doesn't affect me and I don't want to think about something like that because it's so horrible. I'll just pretend like it's not happening. Because again, like I said, if it happens to you or someone it's very quickly thrust upon you and there's not a lot of time to make a decision or things to do inside that world. So preventative is the best method at this point, and that's what I think we've got to get to, is trying to figure out what we can do to prevent or fix when it comes, not wait until we're in the heat of the moment.
And how would you explain DIPG to people who haven't heard of it before?
So I had a doctor explain to me, or in the realm of when we were going through this, the best way to describe it, because everybody wants to think cancer or tumors, you can take it out or you can get rid of it, or you can radiate it specifically. And so an example that was given to me, and I've used it a lot, so says imagine pouring pepper into Jello, right? And then try to go back and get it out. I mean, it's spread everywhere and there's just little bitty specks of it, and it's all throughout their brainstem. So I've just tried to relate it to that. It's not something that we can offer surgery to go get. It's not something that is easy to radiate because, again, you're having to radiate that whole portion of their brain. And then again, when you really realize what that portion of their brain controls, you've got to be careful with what you do. So I think people, again, it's hard to think about something so dispersed, right? It's spread throughout, and how that one little portion could affect something over here, and then this portion affects that, and really how far reaching the effects are of what it can take away and control. So just trying to, it's really the explaining of what your brainstem controls and what it's going to ruin if it's in there. And just trying to explain that there is no rhyme or reason about why the kids get it, and they haven't pinpointed anything specifically to figure out where it comes from. I think the other thing is to try to make sure that people know that they're putting the advice and effort in the right place, because I do know us specifically, everybody has a lot of advice on what they think you can do to cure something. And sometimes that's somewhat well received, but again, it's very hurtful and painful because it's not something a vitamin can fix, or those kind of things. So just making sure that people know if they are ever in contact with it, that they're supportive, not advice driven. If you want to give advice, it probably needs to go toward somebody who can do some research on it rather than a parent who's trying to take care of a child who's sick with it.
And the last question is, what advice do you have to share for a family who has recently joined the DIPG community, or any member who has a family member who has a brain tumor at all?
I think the biggest thing, like I said, even though the diagnosis is what it is, I mean, I think there's hope out there. There's a cure out there. And rather than being defeated by what, the prognosis you're given, to figure out what you can do in the meantime to make the most out of it. And then obviously to connect with other people who have a shared experience, because again, this is very unique in the reactions your kids have, the things that they have to do and suffer through. And the cancer community in itself is very supportive, but again, there's different levels of treatment and the effects of the treatment and the prognosis for those kids. So it's a little bit different to just say I have a friend whose kid has cancer, because unfortunately not all cancers are created equally. So I think it is, if you're able to diagnose and process that, connecting with people who have shared experiences or advice or support is probably the most important, because otherwise then you're kind of living in this bubble that nobody understands. And I think it's very important that you have somebody who understands, good or bad, exactly how horrible an experience it is. But I think without that support, you'll probably go to a very dark place in and after that situation. So that would be my biggest advice. And like I said, making sure that you figure out what that looks like for you, as far as some people are not comfortable talking about it, and some people go and say that they never want to have anything to do with that topic again. And if that's what works for you, then that's what you need to do. But for me, I feel like trying to find something to help kind of keep that moving forward is what makes it feel less like a lost cause, but more of a purpose-driven situation. So, but again, everybody's kind of different.
Thank you again so much for sharing your story and talking with me. It was truly a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.